Hi, everybody. My name is Keely Spring. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And today I have with me Greg. Greg and I were actually introduced by his brother Andrew, who is also a clinician that I've known for a bit here. And Greg is located on the East Coast. I'm here on the West Coast. So interested to hear what Greg has to share about kind of the work he practices. Always interesting even for me to meet clinicians that are in different spaces with different kind of backgrounds and licensing and those kinds of things. So that said, I would love to turn it over to Greg now to, introduce yourself, Greg, and share with the audience what your niches and kind of populations that you work with.
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm Greg Kushnick, and I'm a clinical psychologist in New York City. And I have a practice located in Chelsea. And I work primarily with adults. And my private practice tends to attract high achieving adults, usually in the fields, primarily, but not exclusively in the fields of law and business, entertainment, marketing, a lot of high achieving adults in the New York City area. Um, and I practice, this is really all I do, and it's what I've been doing for about 26 years. I have worked in a variety of settings over the years until I arrived in my private practice, and this is what I've been, you know, only doing, just learning what's helpful and seeing patients, 5 days a week. So I would say that I am developing specialty in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. And I do a lot of that work. I really enjoy it. Uh, I help, I do a lot of work with social anxiety, panic attacks, generalized anxiety, all the different manifestations of anxiety. Um, I would say those would be the two primary areas that I work with. But I mean, I have a very general practice, so I'm also working with students who are dealing with family issues, school issues. Work with a lot of people with bipolar disorder and other mood disorders. I really see the whole range of psychological issues, and I'm, I'm I'm very lucky in that respect to be doing this in Manhattan, and I get to see so many different types of people, so many really dynamic, wonderful, inspiring people, and this is something that I don't know how much therapists get a chance to talk about that or say something about that, but I think what really drives me is, in fact, that I really enjoy the people, because it's such a melting pot here, because there's so many different types of people. Um, it's just I see it as like the biggest privilege in the world to be able to just learn about people from all over the world with all different kinds of personal and family challenges. And I just really appreciate that, that in one day I can work with such a range of people, and I can go a whole day and only two people out of the eight or nine people that I saw were from New Jersey. Most, it's like it's amazing. It's absolutely wonderful, and that is something that I really I think about all the time.
Mhm. Uh,
Can't overstate it. Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, no, that totally resonates for me as well. I
Hmm.
understand that sentiment. Greg, so two questions for you.
Hmm.
Are you mentioned being in Manhattan. Do you see mostly in person or is virtual, a little blend of both? Is that
Um, I see mostly in person, thankfully,
Mhm.
because that just suits my personality. I do about 20 to 25% online,
Okay.
which is totally fine, and I like that proportion. You know, like three out of four are in person. I think the whole notion. of online therapy being so wonderful for therapists and how great it was. I think it was totally overblown in the pandemic. And it was more like cognitive dissonance, like people justifying what they had to do to earn a living. So, I mean, there are people who can do online therapy all day long, and they're fine. It's good, but I don't think it's as powerful as in person. I think the energy exchange is very different in person. um, the vulnerability is different in person, and I just really appreciate that. So I was, as soon as I could come back into the office, and after the pandemic, I was in this office suite here. I was one of the only ones. It was like a ghost town here, and I would come in, and it was amazing.
Uh-huh. Fair.
So that's a long way of saying I love the in-person modality, but I do online therapy happily. It's just you
Sure.
know, I didn't come into the field to talk to people through a screen. So for
Uh,
some people, it's really all they know, right?
yeah, I do think it is a little generational thing, right? I find a
Yeah,
lot of the
absolutely.
younger,
Yeah.
clientele I
Yeah.
have is, you
hmm
know, virtual is just kind of part of the
hmm
experience for them.
hmm
Um,
I think it just fits my personality in that something um, about being in private practice and being kind of like a monk in my office. Um, I really appreciate the human contact. I really appreciate seeing people face to face, and it's like I'm an extrovert kind of stuck in an introvert's daily routine. So I really enjoy
fair.
doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, appreciate you sharing that. One other thing that hasn't come up before, and I'm just curious if you could just, speak high level to, you brought up somebody who is suffering from narcissistic abuse.
hmm
What might be a symptom of that or a telltale sign of, people that might come in for that? Is there certain kind of markers that you see that are aligned with that? It just hasn't come up yet, so that'd be interesting to
Sure,
learn
sure.
about.
I would say something that isn't talked about enough, because there's so many directions I can go with that, but I think
Fair.
something that comes up so much that's actually very hard to see and takes a long, long time to work through is the mental fog
Mm,
that the victims of narcissistic abuse come in with, where it feels like there is this um, sense that they don't know what to think. They're confused. Their
yeah,
memory is affected. Their focus is affected. They don't know in a way what's truth, what's not. There's kind of a sense of life as not real, like a derealization or feeling like they just don't know what to do, like a paralysis that is experienced as a mental fog, not so far off from what some people report in long COVID and having mental
yep,
fog.
yep,
So this is one of the most devastating manifestations. Also, because there are people who are very high functioning, doing amazing work, being out there in the world, changing things. But when you have this mental fog, it's like in order to have this optimal mental state, everything has to align perfectly. It has to be a certain time of day. Very often in the morning, people are kind of more confused. It's something that I see. And then paired with that is this intense self-doubt,
ah,
which has been imbued in them by the narcissist. So you have people who just absolutely doubt everything about themselves, whether they're lovable, whether the love was ever real. It's just this thick layer of self-doubt that we have to trudge through together.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and also the safety element where people just they don't feel safe. Their sense of safety is distorted.
Hmm.
Um, and it takes a lot of work to kind of instill that in the patient. Just
Yeah,
general safety that many of us take for granted.
sure. Yeah, I can, everything that you're saying checks out with some of the people I've worked with who have
Hmm.
kind of been sufferers of narcissistic abuse. So appreciate you sharing that because I think that
Hmm.
might be useful to those listening. Um, so let's step back a little bit from the
Hmm.
clinical work. Just could you give
Right.
me an idea, Greg, of how you came to be a therapist? I mean, we talked a little bit about, you've been doing this for a while, you've been a
Hmm.
clinician for a while.
Hmm.
What was your journey to getting there?
So I had two primary influences growing up. My father is a physical therapist, and I was always inspired by his um, dedication to, helping people feel better in a different way
Hmm.
than I know now in my profession. But I would go to work with him. I would just enjoy um, being there in his clinic and just seeing the general notion of being committed to helping people feel better. I think I got that from him.
Uh-huh.
And he also has a great sense of humor, so we were joking around about it. Even though there was some real heaviness to it, he always added this lightness, this humor,
Hmm.
that really helped me to feel like, it doesn't to be a helping professional doesn't only have to be something very serious and heavy. There can be humor and lightness that helps the healing as well. And he would tell me about his relationships that he would develop with patients in terms of talking about their life and supporting them. The same way like a hair cutter might do it, where you go to your hair cutter, you're talking about your whole life story. Um, so I remember hearing that at a very young age, him telling me how he loved to just chat with his patients and get to know them and make them feel cared for. The other influence is I
Well,
had a great uncle who practiced into his 90s. He was a psychologist and very, very accomplished. Worked Also had a private practice in West Orange, New Jersey, and he was in Mensa. He did all these things that were just, beyond anything I'll ever understand. But he inspired me in our family gatherings where he would kind of sit in the corner, the way you might think of like a Freudian psychologist. And he was a man of very few words, a little bit like Yoda. And but when he said something, it was incredible, and there was such wisdom in what he said, and he was so kind of caring and kind of mildly jolly. He he just inspired me um, just to see what uh, it was like to get to know a psychologist at every family gathering. We wouldn't talk so in depth, but I think it was like his demeanor and the respect he got. And I remember going into his office, and this is probably when he was like, I don't know, 80, and just looking up, and it's all plaques and honors on the wall. And I think, that was something that is just kind of burned into my mind. And I just remember having this feeling of awe. And I just decided I wanted to do that at a very young age. So I was already targeting being a therapist in high school. So I'm lucky in that I had just a straight path through.
you knew
Um,
right away.
yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be on Broadway. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was like every other little boy. And but once I was like, you know, 13, 14, I knew I wanted to be a therapist. And then I worked in a camp for kids with disabilities as a teenager. And that was amazing. And I originally thought I wanted to go into that as a specialization, developmental disabilities. And I sort of veered off at some point away from that.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. Sometimes some of these clinical interviews,
Hmm.
there are people like yourself that knew kind of very early on, it's more of kind of
Hmm.
this calling feeling, feels like a little bit, kind of
Hmm.
a. Greg, could you just give me a high level view of maybe some modalities or tools that you like to, techniques that you like to use with, I mean, sure, and your decades of experience here, I'm sure you have quite the tool set. Are there things, modalities that you generally like?
Right. So I was initially in my graduate school. It was my graduate school, the training was split 50-50 with one was psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy, and the other was cognitive behavioral therapy. And so I was initially very informed by psychoanalysis, but and it's always I'm always processing kind of like on a second level with clients where if I see that that's helpful to someone, I might go in that direction. But I'm really primarily a cognitive behavioral psychologist, and that's really about focusing on helping people to change their unproductive or unhelpful thought patterns. And I focus on people's belief systems, their attitudes, just difficult thoughts in general, thoughts that come over them in a moment. They're often called automatic thoughts. And I help people to kind of restructure the way they think about things. And we put kind of we identify these patterns that tend not to work and add around these ideas because I think sometimes CBT there's an element of saying like no, that's a bad thought, or that's a you shouldn't think that way, and which has a shaming element I've
Yes,
learned over the years, because it's kind of like how I was trained initially to be like, oh no, that's a bad thought, you should label that a bad thought.
right.
And I realized that while I have wonderful intentions with that, it really makes someone feel like, you know, I feel terrible that I think this way because a lot of people are already dealing with so much shame. So I think of it as helping to build in some acceptance in what they think, but kind of giving them alternatives, giving people varying perspectives on what's bothering them so that they have other options. It's like giving them a toolbox to be able to cope with difficult thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's much more helpful. So they have strategies to use
Hmm.
when they're struggling. But I think some people go a little bit too far with talking about sort of bad thoughts, or when you get too caught up in this notion like, oh, you shouldn't think that way. I think people just feel badly. I don't think that works so well. But I know the new modalities are focusing more on acceptance, right? Accepting what you're thinking, not beating yourself up for having these kinds of thoughts. As acceptance and commitment therapy, um, IFS. Um, I think I'm informed by a lot of different approaches. I read about everything. I steal techniques from different modalities. So I'm very much when someone comes into my office, I kind of try to understand the way they think about the world, the way they um, think about their own struggles, and then I'll use what I think is like speaks their language, what's effective for them, and I'm kind of flexible in that way.
Hmm.
But I usually default to a more cognitive behavioral approach, which is very much in the here and now,
Hmm.
um, something that doesn't have you dwelling in the past for too long. Because the truth is, a lot of people who come into therapy, they often don't want to hang out too much in the past. They want to figure out how to handle it in the present. So I've kind of adjusted to that as, the need for a here and now approach seemed to increase over the years. Long ago, people seemed like, they wanted more of the psychoanalysis
Yeah.
and looking at early childhood relationships. I mean, it's made a massive resurgence, and people I notice are looking more for psychoanalysis.
Hmm.
Um, but I've evolved to kind of give people things to be able to handle difficult moments as they happen,
Hmm.
and not just insight,
Hmm.
right? Because insight doesn't lead to behavior change, right? Many people come in like, I know the problem. I know exactly what's wrong with me. I know where it came from.
Uh-huh.
I just don't. know how to shift into, altering the way I think about myself or my relationship or the world, and I don't know how to change the behaviors that are associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things I do like about CBT in general, since you brought up, is that it is a lot of tools. There are a lot of
Yeah.
strategic kind of tools for how do you
hmm
deal with
hmm
things in the moment.
Makes
Um,
people feel prepared.
yeah,
That's really
exactly.
what it comes down to.
Exactly.
People know that if they're worried about, a massive wave of social anxiety in an unstructured social setting, or a panic attack in a Broadway show, they feel like they have some options.
Sure. Yeah.
Where if you've been sitting in psychoanalysis, that's not going to help in
hmm
that moment.
hmm Yeah. Um, so that kind of we've been kind of weaving through some of my questions here and some
hmm
of your answers already, but so you kind of touched upon this a little bit just now, but what would a session look like you with you? Is it more organic? It sounds like a little, you talked about flexibility.
hmm
Um, is that kind of more the style, or is there some sorts of, sometimes I talk to somebody who's, for example, has EMDR or whatever, and there's protocols and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like for you, it might be a little bit more flexible, kind of meeting the person where they're at.
hmm Yeah, that's exactly right. I am flexible in my approach. Um, there are a lot of people who come in with an agenda, or they are looking for a semi-structured approach, and then I adjust to that. But in general, I'm really, I do have, like you said, a more organic approach to, seeing where people want to go, as long as it's productive, right? I don't want to kind of waste time with them. People want to feel better, so I try to sort of keep it moving. I want to have them feel like they're gaining something from it, even though a lot of these major issues that people want to change take a lot of time and patience to get through. But yes, that's a long way of saying I'm very flexible in my approach, and I think people appreciate that. Um, you know, it
Yeah, I
kind of
think,
That's the
sometimes
feedback. hmm
yeah, I think sometimes CBT even can feel really structured, but
hmm
I
Oh,
use CBT all the time, and there's
hmm
structure pieces, and you can I think really modify it for the person and be able
hmm
to kind of still be very flexible with it, which is one of the
hmm
reasons I like CBT as well.
Right.
Um, okay, is there anything that still surprises you about therapy?
Um, I guess I have two answers to that. One is I think I've seen so many different manifestations of suffering,
Hmm.
including like in my training and my internship working in a city hospital and working in nursing homes and rehab centers. I feel like in some way, like I've seen everything. So in one way, I'm not that shocked by things.
hmm
Um, but on the other hand, I think if I had to give an answer, what I would say is I'm often, and this isn't necessarily in the therapy room, but more about people's attitudes in general. I guess it's just our bias as clinicians, but I find it shocking when people have family members or colleagues or friends who are totally unsupportive of going into therapy, where therapy is seen as hocus pocus, or it's seen as a waste of time, or something that just doesn't work, or it's for certain type of people. I repeatedly find myself surprised at how many people there are out there, even in modern cultures,
hmm
who
Yeah,
feel like it's not going to work, or and people have never tried it, feel like I would never go to therapy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I understand certain cultural
Sure.
um, beliefs that
hmm
make people reluctant to go into therapy, or where it's just not available, so they just don't have the exposure. But I find myself like, really? You're telling me like therapy will never help, you know, your broken marriage? I don't get that. But I do get it. But in the moment, I'm like, oh God. let me show you, I'll show you it's effective. Please give me the chance to show you. That's
Right.
often what I'm saying to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I can resonate with that piece as well, in that I do think that there is a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of stereotypes, and
Hmm.
quite frankly, it's one of the reasons I'm doing these interviews is try to help people understand that it
Hmm.
is, can be really effective, and that there are
Yeah.
a lot of wonderful clinicians that are doing really solid, great work out there that,
Hmm.
know what they're doing, have a plan, can help
Yeah.
you get to wherever you want to go. It really
Hmm.
is kind of surprising when you get that pushback or
Absolutely.
about it, for
And
sure.
then layered on top of that, I'm often seeing, since I do the work with people who've been harmed by someone with narcissistic tendencies, I there's also the narcissist dissuading of their partner to go into therapy because it's a threat, right? Because
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
pulls them away from their control.
Hmm.
So there's also that element that I'm often seeing. It's just you
Fair.
have people who see therapy as a threat because if one person grows, the other person stays the same, that person outgrows the relationship in therapy,
Yes.
which is why I feel like both people often need to go into therapy so that they keep up with each other.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's important, right? When a spouse says, I think I've been working on myself and I'm really gaining perspective, and you haven't done anything but, play PlayStation. You should really try to catch up because, you know, I have much more updated views on things, and I feel like I'm outgrowing the relationship because you're not working on yourself. I mean, this is so, so common.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. I even see that with some of the couples that I work with. One partner is all in, and then the other
hmm
partner is, not really
hmm
in, not clear on what they want to get
hmm
out of it, doesn't think it's
yeah,
necessarily gonna work, or, so
yeah,
you can get it on so many levels there of
right. And
pushback.
not wanting to face the personal
Yeah.
responsibility, not wanting to take accountability
Yeah.
because of what that leads to and what
Yeah.
becomes exposed in that way, the vulnerability that comes with it, the shame that comes with
Or
owning,
what's going
what you're about or what you've done or what you've said.
on. Hmm.
So I really I'm still shocked like it's the first time when someone um, tries to convince their partner not to go to therapy when the partner's suffering.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Constantly
Can be.
surprised by that.
Yeah, that can be very surprising. I
Hmm.
understand where you're coming from with that. To that end, are there things that you wish people, I mean, I feel like this kind of part of your answer there, so, feel
Hmm.
free to say like that, that it encompasses
That, yeah.
it. But is there something that you wish people knew or understood about therapy?
Um, they knew, wish they knew or understood. I think it's really in line with this notion of if you feel like if you're able to get your foot in the door, if you're able to try it out, if there's enough there to try therapy, especially with someone who is experienced or with whom you sense you have a connection, a therapist who, with whom it seems like it's going to work, that you'd be surprised as to what can be accomplished in therapy in the right situation with the right timing. It could be so, so powerful and transformative. And uh, I think around here, most people kind of know that, that it's just therapy is such a part of our culture. And it's so often that people will say, what does your therapist say about that? That's just part of the natural social communication, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that would really be my answer
Fair,
to your question.
fair. Okay, so final question in this kind of more
Mhm.
clinical area
Hmm.
of our conversation here. Is there, we talked a little bit about CBT and different, you brought up kind of, reframing thoughts. Is there a
Hmm.
tool or something that you generally kind of enjoy sharing, or that you would like to share with this audience that might be useful?
Yeah, yeah, I'll share something that I often default to it's the idea of focusing on judgment, and this relates to uh, helping people deal with pathologically certain um, partners and parents, and it helps people just deal with a lot of self-loathing or self-doubt, and that is to help people become aware of their judgments. And what I always recommend is that you develop this observing side, this observing self that listens for the judgment, what it sounds like, especially judgment of yourself. But I'm also talking about judgment of other people. And so just to listen for that part of you that does that. For example, you're walking down the street and you see someone wearing, I don't know, like a suit that's way too big for the person, and suddenly in your mind you're like, oh God, that how could he wear that? To be able to say to yourself, oh, there I go, judging again. There goes Greg, judging again. To be aware of this. And then it's a harder task to focus inward and to be able to catch yourself when you're saying to yourself, oh my God, I'm such an idiot for forgetting that meeting. And then the moment you say this, to say to yourself, whoop, here I go, judging again.
Mhm.
It's very, very important to catch yourself. And the goal with that, even if it's 50 times a day, the goal with that is to put a little bit of space between you and the judgment, because it's really unhelpful and it actually has oftentimes the opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve. It sort of has this stifling effect like guilt.
Yeah.
It makes us, it paralyzes us.
Hmm.
So I also use this. Another manifestation would be uh, if if you're around people who tend to have pathological certainty, meaning like their way is the way and there's no other opinion but their own, to be able to, when there's a little bit of tension, when someone delivers something that just feels uncomfortable to you, to be able to say something like, "Who are we to judge?" You know,
Hmm.
um, I,
Hmm.
I, I'm faced with this personally, and it comes up a lot with clients.
Hmm.
I mean, especially the work with people who are, let's say, married to someone with narcissistic tendencies.
Sure.
Uh, to have this as one option available, to be able to respond to someone who's shaming or who is sort of standing on their soapbox dictating reality, to be able to say, like, who are we to judge? I see it as orange, you see it as red. Okay, there's two, versions, and that's okay. There's not just one truth here. So this could be very helpful as one option. If you feel uncomfortable around very assertive people or aggressive people, especially when they're friends, right? But
Sure.
everyone has that friend. Everyone has that person who sort of dictates how things are or
Hmm.
should be, and you're just, whoa,
Yeah.
so good to think
Yeah.
about that.
I love that. This comes up. I work a lot with perfectionists, and so they
Hmm.
they tend to have this tendency as well. There's a right way, a wrong way,
Hmm.
kind of that really kind of black and white framing of things. And so I
Hmm.
like the kind of reframing it as, just differencing of opinions and, you know, judgment, noticing, building that self-awareness piece around the judgment that is coming up for them, whether it's about themselves or others, around what's
Hmm.
right, what's wrong.
Yeah, it really does tend to make a difference, even a mild difference, but
Sure.
a difference nonetheless, to be able to, even for a perfectionist, to
Hmm.
get used to this notion of once they say the judgment to themselves or to someone else, to be able to just right after say, whoops, there I go, judging again. It does kind of ease the self-judgment a little bit at a time.
For sure. For sure. Well, thank you for sharing those clinical insights, Greg. Appreciate it. Greg, we're going to dive now into a little bit more kind of personal questions to get to know you a little bit more in personal. I promise they're not too deep diving. But are you game to be?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, great. Love it. Okay, so first question, what is something that's making you happy right now?
Something that's making me happy right now is uh, this kind of morning hugs from my son.
Oh,
He's 7 right now and at this phase where every morning he comes into our room and, he's still warm and sort of lays with us. And just that probably 8-minute sequence where he's there, still wanting to be babied a little bit. Um, First thing in the morning, before I do anything else, I'm really, really enjoying that. And then um, I would say to balance it out, I think with my daughter, who's a little older, some of our conversations about more complex topics we have at night, almost before bed, where she's really
bookends to your
curious
day.
about things and growing up very fast
Mhm.
and really appreciating seeing how she's uh, thinking about the world and uh, just it's incredible to watch the explosion in the way she thinks about things and the progress in how she's uh, understanding people and empathizing with others and wanting to change the world, and it's incredible. It's
Mhm.
really, really wonderful.
Love it. Great answer. Okay, what's your favorite app? Doesn't have to be therapy related, but favorite app
My
when
f-
you use often or like
my favorite app. You mean besides Block Blast?
what's Block Blast?
Yeah,
Is that like a
Block
matching
Blast is
game or something?
Block Blast
Yeah.
like for Tetris fans.
Oh, I love
Block
Tetris.
Blast is the advanced version of Tetris,
All right.
and it's really fun to do. And I'm competing with my niece, who is has like her score is 4 times higher than mine, her high score, and it's really very fun to do. But I have to monitor it because I can go for too long with that. And otherwise, if we're going to leave that aside, um, I would say my favorite app would be ESPN, just because I love to keep track of the statistics of my favorite players, and I like just reading about all the different sports, and um, that's sort of I guess my simple side is that I just enjoy that as a nice distraction.
Yeah.
And then I would say the third one would be the PESI seminars,
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
and
Great.
some of the trainings that I've been doing on internal family systems and acceptance and commitment therapy, and a few others, a DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. I've been killing it at the gym. I'm on the treadmill, like listening to some of these as much as I can, before once I get kind of out of breath, I can't really listen to, continuing education anymore, and then I have to change it to music. But I'm really enjoying like the learning experience, and it's a muscle that we have to build. And
Hmm.
if I don't do it too often, it does atrophy. So,
Yeah.
but when I'm in it and I'm learning and learning bits of information each day or every other day or every third day, listening to a sequence of like Frank Anderson or one of the other really cutting edge, therapists out there who are teaching, he's teaching IFS. Um, it's really a great feeling. But again, for me, I need the momentum. I need to
Sure.
keep doing it because if I don't do it, eventually I'll go periods where I'm still reading pretty much all the time. But in terms of watching videos of seminars and listening,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
I really appreciate the PESI app, which lets me do that.
Yeah. That's
What's
great.
your favorite app?
What is my favorite? Oh, I would say there's two that I love. One is Shazam, which is
Mhm.
you're right when you hear a
Oh
song
yeah, yeah,
and you're like, what's that song?
yeah.
I love that. And then coupled with that, I love music. I'm a big proponent of, kind of live shows and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Is Pandora. So I
Oh,
learn
Pandora,
about new
nice,
artists all
nice,
the time because I've got playlists or whatever that, will kind of
fun.
introduce you to new
Yeah,
people.
I should have said Spotify. You're reminding me. We use Spotify all the time.
Mhm.
In our family, there's usually one show that is like the theme of the season, like There was SpongeBob that was put on in as a production, so we listened to the music to SpongeBob the musical, which is actually really good, by the way. People would believe that. And so we listened to it and listened to it and listened until we can't listen to it anymore. And then lately it's Mufasa, my son, that my kids are singing the songs, and we're hearing that a little too much. So we have these sort of themes, and then they transition into other things on Spotify. Hamilton, we listen to
Uh-huh.
that constantly for God knows how long. Um,
Yeah.
Pandora, not Pandora, Shazam. I was using it. We were at an electronic music party, which is probably my first time doing that in about 20 years. And I was constantly Shazamming every song. I'm like, this is amazing. And
Yeah.
so my wife's like, why do you keep doing that? I'm like, I love this music. I want this at the gym. I want to listen to this. It makes me feel good. I remember Shazamming like 7 or 8 songs. Um, and so happy that for the ones that it detected, there were ones that I guess the DJ was mixing that it couldn't pick up on. But
Version of it, but yeah. Yeah,
mhm.
I do it a lot when we're watching TV shows or something. A song comes on and I'm like, oh, what's this song?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I also use it if it's like, I know this song. Who is this song? Who is this by?
Hmm.
It's got some good uses.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Beach or mountains?
Oh, beach. Um, my wife and I are real beach people. We love being around the water, walking on boardwalks, like in New Jersey, since I grew up in New Jersey, that's what we do, right? The Jersey Shore,
Uh-huh.
going to the boardwalk.
Sure.
So it's sort of built into me
Hmm.
um, to go to the boardwalk and just appreciate the water. And so, I mean, I'm happy with a mountain. We don't seem to put ourselves in that situation very often.
Fair enough.
I went to Lake Placid, and that was amazing. That's about as mountainous as I've been to in a while, but definitely the beach, especially when you can walk out far and it's still up to, the top of your feet when you're, very deep, and the water is still kind of a low tide. I love that experience.
Fair. Okay, what is one thing that movies never get right?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by. I used to love on HBO, in treatment. Is that what it's called? In treatment?
Oh, I remember. I didn't watch that show, but
Yeah, it was very, very good with Gabriel Byrne. But more recently, the one I saw was a documentary. My wife and I have been watching a lot of documentaries because she's releasing a documentary film. So we've been
oh,
watching other ones, and we watched the one with Jonah Hill. Did you see that one?
I did. I didn't like
Yeah,
it.
it was very painful to watch,
It was
and
super painful. Thank
it
you.
was so self-indulgent. And
Yes,
once he veered off into just talking about himself and his experience, to me, it was almost unwatchable
I didn't
and
get all the way
probably
through it.
unhelpful for the masses.
Yeah,
But
I
what
didn't
I've
get
learned is,
through it.
yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately, with documentaries especially, it's the one of the kinds of documentaries is these celebrity documentaries that people tend to watch, and that's what, Netflix wants to put up. So, but some of them are just so self-indulgent, where the celebrity just gets lost in looking at themselves in the mirror.
yeah,
And I don't know that it's so relatable, honestly.
yeah, yeah. He lost me when he took off the wig that he was wearing and was like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Really?" And this is a sound screen.
yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm
we
done.
didn't even make it
We're done.
through, like done with that one. Yeah.
Right. What's your just out of curiosity, what is your wife's documentary about?
Oh, her documentary is on hypnobirthing,
Oh, okay.
which is a gentle birthing method.
Mhm.
She went all over America interviewing moms who are using this method, hypnobirthing, to have their babies. And she interviewed doulas and doctors around the topic of hypnobirthing. And it's really it's an effort to empower women to take control of their birth,
Mhm.
and it also, very importantly and related to our field, she has a mission to uh, promote the sharing of birth trauma because a lot of women don't feel justified in sharing what they went through at birth. They just think maybe like, oh, no one died. So who am I to complain that the doctor insisted that I do this thing? So she's really on a mission to uh, inspire women to share, what they've been through in a safe way and ask for what they want at birth, like to take control because kind of Western medicine has the doctors dictating what should happen in the birth room. And it wasn't like that way back when. I think the British kind of messed that up in making it into a medical event. It's really quite a natural event.
Yeah,
So hypnobirthing is
getting
promotes a
it.
whole different way of looking at birth. And so she is kind of sharing this really powerful piece. And it's also, she used hypnobirthing with our son and kind of shares her journey and really does some phenomenal interviews with some fascinating people and doctors with perspectives that are just really eye-opening, really incredible. Try to change the way we look at birth.
Yeah. Um, are you familiar with Gabor Mate's work?
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
He talks a little bit about this, especially in The Myth, the Normal, one of his latest books. He talks about, how he was causing harm to women unintentionally, back in the day.
Right.
He realized how traumatic this experience and some of the kind of aspects of that. So I look forward to seeing that. You'll have to let me
Yeah.
know
It's called
when
Fear and
it
Now.
comes out.
Fear and Now. Yeah.
Here and
Uh-huh.
now. Okay, what's the best way to relax
The best way to relax is,
for
I
you?
would say, to first get into movement, to
Uh,
have the contrast, to do something that gets your heart rate up.
mhm.
Uh, I think walking, motoring around a certain area, maybe a path that you don't normally take or a familiar path, and then going and sitting down and letting your heart rate come down. But I am a big proponent of not using phones to self-soothe, which is what we all default to these days. So I think any method that does not involve a phone, I, maybe I don't really mean that, but just
Yeah,
not using the phone to self-soothe can really help us to self-regulate
sure.
uh, in a healthier way.
Mhm.
But I would think the contrast between movement and non-movement is what allows people to relax. If people are just laying around and relaxing, I don't think they achieve the same level of relaxation. You need some kind of active, intentional movement, if possible, to then contrast it with stillness.
That juxtaposition of the
Hmm.
two. Mhm. Okay, where's a dream trip location? Where would you like to go?
I would like to go to Japan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard
Uh,
amazing things about it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think we're waiting till my kids are a little bit older, but I am fascinated by the architecture and the history and the culture and the food. I very much want to go and just experience Japan for a week or two. It's really something that calls out to me.
Okay. Okay, what advice would you give your younger self? You could go back in time. What would you like to say to your younger self?
Good question. I think I would tell my younger self to get used to being uncomfortable and to stop trying to avoid states of discomfort, to really focus on learning discipline at a very young age, uh, so that some of these habits are built in. I mean, a lot of the things that I've been able to accomplish, I learned at age 40. A lot of it I learned in my older age, and some of these habits were not instilled in me as a kid. So I would work on having a very strong muscle for discipline. And at the same time, I would also focus on caring less about what people thought of me and being less self-conscious. I was a very self-conscious teenager. I thought everyone was looking at the pimple on my nose. It felt like it was this big. And
Wow.
I had such an imaginary audience, and it was almost paralyzing at times. And I think I carried that through my college and graduate school, my younger adult life. And then the last thing I would say, to give you the long answer here, is to focus on values, to focus on what really matters to me from a very young age, to build that in so that I have a compass for dealing with life. I think this is really important, and it helps people gain the right perspective on money and success, and it helps people be good citizens and good to other people. And I really think a kind of a values-based approach in teenagers and young adults can go a long way to give them a guide for living. And it automates a lot of decisions as well, so you don't have to wonder about what you should or shouldn't do. The values kind of push you in the right direction.
Yeah, fair. Okay. Out of the four seasons, what do you like the best?
I love summer. I
Beach,
love
summer.
summer. I again love the beach,
Mhm.
and I like the fact that we're outside so much and just the vibe. I think I'm at my happiest in summer, and just everything around the warm weather, not the hot weather. Reasonably hot weather. I absolutely love it, and um, I I I like the anticipation of summer, like that part of spring where there's a sizzle in the air and you have a little bit of spring fever. But that's really about summer because it just indicates that summer's on the way.
Sure.
So I really love the summers, even though it feels like time accelerates in the summer. It goes by so fast.
So, final question, Greg.
Mhm.
When you look back at your life, what do you hope to be able to say?
I hope to be able to say that I valued the right things, that I truly chose the relationships that mattered to me over other endeavors, and that I represented knowledge and wisdom and humor and lightness around the people I care for. Um, and that, in my dedication to the work, that I've, impacted people, um, and that their lives are changed based on, our joint efforts in the therapy room. But really, it's about knowing that I made certain choices that leaned heavily on enjoying my relationships, enjoying my family and friends, over other possible paths that I could have taken.
Well,
Right.
thank you, Greg. You are officially seen. And I
Thank you
appreciate
so
you taking the
much.
time to speak with me and share.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the
my pleasure.
conversation. For anybody listening, I will put his information below so that you can reach out if you would like to. Anything else before we end here, Greg?
No, that's it. Thank you so very much. This was fun. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks again.